My wife's new boyfriend forced my daughter underwater in our own pool and told me I had only 30 seconds to confess or lose her forever. As I stood frozen, I could hear her thrashing and struggling for breath, and in that moment I realized the nightmare I was trapped in was far darker than I ever imagined. You know that gut-wrenching moment when your entire world, the fortress you built brick by painstaking brick, doesn't just crumble, it explodes from the inside out? When the person sleeping next to you isn't just a stranger, but the architect of your complete destruction? And then, you discover they're not just taking your life, your money, your future, they're planning to take your daughter too, to poison her very soul? That's where my story begins, and trust me, the ending is anything but pretty. My name is Marcus Bright, and for 42 years, I lived a life of rigid control. My company, Bright Security, protected high-profile clients across the country, and my steel-gray eyes had seen things in Afghanistan, in the cutthroat world of corporate espionage, that would break most people. Nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for the betrayal that was festering right in the heart of my own home. Our house, if you could even call it just a house, sat on 5 acres of pristine Texas landscape. The kind of place where the swimming pool reflected the setting sun like liquid gold. I pulled my black Range Rover into the circular driveway that evening, immediately noticing a silver BMW already parked there. It belonged to Derek McMahon. He'd become a fixture over the last 3 months, introduced by my wife, Cheryl, as a business associate from her interior design firm. Daddy. It was my daughter, Emma, calling from the front steps. At 16, she was everything good in my increasingly complicated world. She had her late mother's sharp intelligence, but my unwavering loyalty. I'd adopted her when she was 8, after her biological mother, my first wife, died in a car accident. Emma was my anchor, my pure truth. I pulled her into a hug, inhaling the familiar scent of her vanilla perfume. "How's my girl?" I asked, but her whispered reply sent a jolt of ice through me. "Derek's here again," she murmured, her voice tight with a tension that made every military instinct I possessed sharpen. "He's been asking me weird questions about you, about your work." My jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "What kind of questions?" "Like whether you keep work files at home, if you travel with security details, stuff like that." Emma pulled back, her green eyes, so much like her biological mother's, filled with concern. "I don't trust him, Dad." Before I could even respond, Cheryl appeared in the doorway. 7 years of marriage, and she still had the power to stop my breath. Her auburn hair shimmered in the porch light, and that designer dress clung to curves that had graced magazine covers during her brief modeling career. But lately, there had been a subtle shift in her hazel eyes, a distant quality that spoke of secrets, of something held back. "Marcus, honey, you're home early," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Derek and I were just discussing the Henderson project." Derek McMahon emerged from behind her, his 6-foot frame filling the doorway. 35, ruggedly handsome, the kind of guy popular with wealthy clients seeking interior design and, apparently, other services. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive watch catching the light as he extended his hand. "Marcus, good to see you again," he said, his grip firm, lasting a fraction too long. "Cheryl's been telling me about your fascinating work. Private security must be incredibly demanding." "It has its moments," I replied, my voice neutral. I'd learned long ago to reveal nothing until I understood the battlefield completely. That evening, over dinner at the mahogany table that had belonged to my grandfather, the conversation flowed with practiced ease. Derek, the charming host, regaled us with stories from his latest projects, a tech mogul's penthouse, a senator's countryside estate. He was attentive, utterly convincing in his role as the friendly business associate. But I noticed the subtle touches, his hand brushing Cheryl's when passing the salt, the way her laugh carried a breathless quality it had lost with me years ago. The meaningful glances they shared when they thought I wasn't looking. After Derek left, I retreated to my study. It was my sanctuary, lined with military commendations, photos from my consulting days, and a gun safe that held far more than just firearms. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, its amber liquid a silent comfort. Then, I activated the secure laptop that connected me to my network of contacts worldwide. Owen Ward answered on the second ring. Marcus, what's the situation? Owen had served under me in Iraq and Afghanistan. His specialty, long-range reconnaissance and elimination. After discharge, he'd transitioned into freelance work, the kind that didn't appear on tax returns. His loyalty to me was absolute, forged in the mountains where I'd pulled him from a burning Humvee. I need surveillance on a target, I said, sending Derek's photo and details through our encrypted channel. Full background, financial records, communication intercepts. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he uses. How deep do you want me to go? Owen asked. I took a long sip of bourbon, feeling its burn match the cold fire growing in my chest. All the way to the bottom, Owen. This one's personal. After ending the call, I sat in the darkness, my mind already working through possibilities. In my world, information was power, and power was survival. If Derek McMahon thought he could waltz into Marcus Bright's life and take what belonged to me, he was about to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating a man who had spent 20 years perfecting the art of controlled violence. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed midnight as I began planning what would become the most important operation of my life. 3 days later, Owen's report arrived via encrypted email, and I felt the foundation of my world crack like thin ice. Derek McMahon wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was a professional con artist, his real name confirmed, with a specialty in wealthy, lonely spouses. He'd left a trail of broken marriages and empty bank accounts across 4 states. I sat in my downtown office, the Dallas skyline glittering beyond my floor-to-ceiling windows, numbly reading. The report detailed his methods: identify the target, study their weaknesses, infiltrate their social circle, seduce the spouse, gather financial information, then disappear with everything he could liquidate. The timeline was typically 6 months. He'd been working Cheryl for 3. But there was more. The surveillance footage Owen had gathered showed Derek and Cheryl at the Agilis Hotel, their passion evident even through the grainy telephoto images. In one particularly damning video, Cheryl was laughing as she showed Derek documents I recognized as my own financial records. The betrayal cut deeper than any shrapnel I had taken in Afghanistan. But unlike those battlefield wounds, this one demanded a different kind of surgery. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma: Dad, can we talk? It's about Mom and Derek. I drove home through the afternoon traffic, my mind cold and calculating. The house felt different now, tainted by deception and greed. I found Emma in the pool house, her usual after-school refuge where she did homework and practiced guitar. I saw them together, Emma said without preamble, her young face aged by knowledge no teenager should carry. Yesterday, when they thought I was at soccer practice, they were in your bedroom, Dad. I sat beside her on the wicker couch, my large hands gentle as I took hers. How long have you known? About a month. I wanted to tell you, but I wasn't sure how. Tears gathered in her green eyes. She's not who I thought she was. Neither of them are. No, sweetheart, they're not. My voice carried a deadly calm that Emma had heard only once before, the day I had confronted the drunk driver who had nearly hit her school bus. But here's what we're going to do about it. That evening, I called a family meeting. We gathered in the living room, Cheryl curled on a leather sofa in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater that had cost more than most people's monthly salary. Derek had been invited, of course, another business discussion that was becoming increasingly frequent. I've been thinking about our future, I began, my voice warm and conversational. My work has been demanding lately, and I realize I haven't been the husband and father I should be. Cheryl's face showed surprise, while Derek's expression remained carefully neutral. Emma, seated across from them, played her part perfectly, the concerned daughter worried about her parents' marriage. I want to make some changes, I continued, starting with a family vacation. I've been looking at properties in Costa Rica, beach houses, Complete privacy, a chance for us to reconnect. That sounds wonderful, Cheryl said, her voice carrying genuine warmth for the first time in months. When were you thinking? Next month. I've already spoken with a realtor about a property in Manuel Antonio, private beach, fully staffed, the works. I smiled, but Emma caught the predatory gleam in my eyes. Derek, you should join us. Consider it a working vacation. Cheryl mentioned you might be interested in expanding into international markets. Derek leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. That's incredibly generous, Marcus, are you sure? Absolutely. Family friends are important, I said, my smile never wavering. Besides, it would give us a chance to get to know each other better. I feel like we've been dancing around a real friendship. After Derek left that night, Emma and I sat on the back patio while Cheryl took her usual evening bath. The pool lights cast rippling reflections on the water, and I found myself studying the depth markers along the sides. You have a plan, Emma said. It wasn't a question. I have the beginning of one. I looked at my daughter, this brave young woman who had chosen my side without hesitation. But it's going to require both of us to be very convincing actors for the next few weeks. What do you need me to do? I outlined the basics, continue normally, gather information, and most importantly, make Derek believe he was winning. Emma listened with the focused attention she had inherited from her adoptive father, asking strategic questions that reminded me why I was so proud of her. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to go inside. I need you to understand that after this is over, nothing will be the same. Your relationship with Cheryl will end permanently. Are you prepared for that? Emma stared at the pool for a long moment, then met my eyes with a resolve that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She stopped being my mom the day she chose him over our family. I'm with you, Dad. Whatever it takes. That night, I lay awake beside my sleeping wife, listening to her breath and memorizing the sound. Soon, she would understand the difference between Marcus Bright, the loving husband, and Marcus Bright, the man who had survived 3 tours in hell by never showing mercy to his enemies. The grandfather clock chimed 3 a.m. as I began refining the details of Derek McMahon's destruction. 2 weeks into the charade, I had assembled my team. The Costa Rica vacation was a convenient cover for bringing together the specialists I would need for what I had begun thinking of as Operation Clean House. Owen Ward arrived first, his military bearing evident despite his casual clothes. He had been conducting surveillance from a rented apartment across from Derek's place, documenting every move, every visitor, every weakness. His preliminary report was thorough. Derek was overconfident, had no military training, and relied entirely on charm and manipulation rather than physical prowess. He's soft, Owen reported as we sat in my study. Never been in a real fight, probably never even held a gun. This won't be difficult from a tactical standpoint. It's not about difficulty, I replied, studying Derek's profile photos. It's about sending a message that reaches beyond just him. The second recruit was Calvin Bond, a former Navy SEAL who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in corporate espionage. Calvin had the unique skill of making people disappear. Not permanently, but thoroughly enough that they ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Bank accounts, credit reports, social security numbers, employment records, Calvin could erase a person's entire digital footprint with surgical precision. Your wife's boyfriend has been sloppy, Calvin reported during our meeting at an upscale downtown restaurant. He's got accounts under 3 different names, but all traceable once you know the patterns. Give me the word and Derek McMahon becomes a ghost. The third member was unexpected, Jeremiah Jacobs, Cheryl's own divorce attorney. I had approached him not for legal advice, but for strategic intelligence. Jeremiah was ambitious, expensive, and utterly without loyalty to any client who couldn't continue paying his fees. She's been asking hypothetical questions about asset division, Jeremiah revealed over drinks at his private club. Specifically, what would happen to your business holdings in a divorce and whether your military pension could be touched. How hypothetical? I asked. She scheduled a formal consultation for next week under a false name, but my secretary recognized her from the society pages. Jeremiah's smile was predatory. For the right consideration, I could provide you with advanced notice of her strategy. I paid Jeremiah's retainer that night, ensuring that every move Cheryl made would be reported back to me within hours. But the most crucial recruitment happened at home, with Emma. She continued to play the role of the naive daughter while gathering intelligence that professional operatives couldn't access. She had befriended Derek, playing up her supposed admiration for his sophistication and worldliness. In return, Derek had begun treating her like a confidant, sharing details about his relationship with Cheryl that revealed the depth of their planning. "He thinks you're some kind of government contractor," Emma reported during one of our evening strategy sessions. "Cheryl told him about your overseas clients and the cash payments. They're planning to clean out your accounts and disappear to Monaco." "Timeline?" I pressed. "He wants to move faster, but Cheryl is insisting on waiting until after your Costa Rica trip. She thinks you'll be more relaxed and trusting afterward." Emma's voice carried disgust. "She actually said it would be easier to finish things once you're emotionally invested in fixing the marriage." I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. I had given Cheryl 7 years of my life, my protection, my name, and my complete trust. She had responded by calculating the most efficient way to destroy me. That weekend, I hosted a barbecue, ostensibly to celebrate Derek's birthday. The guest list was carefully chosen. Owen and Calvin were introduced as old military friends, Jeremiah and his wife presented as longtime family friends, and several of my legitimate business associates were there, providing cover for the operational discussions happening in plain sight. Derek basked in the attention, playing the role of Cheryl's successful boyfriend while charming the wives and impressing the men with his knowledge of fine wines and luxury travel. He was good at his job, I admitted to myself, probably the most convincing sociopath I had encountered outside of a war zone. But Derek made one crucial mistake. He underestimated Emma. During the party, as adults mingled around the pool and bar, Derek approached Emma where she sat on the diving board, her feet dangling in the water. "You know, Emma, you're really mature for your age," he said, his voice carrying a tone that made Emma's skin crawl. "Most kids your age wouldn't understand the complexity of adult relationships." "What do you mean?" Emma asked, her voice carefully innocent. "Well, sometimes people fall out of love, and new love has to make room for itself. Your father's a good man, but he's not the right man for your mother anymore." Derek sat beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "When that happens, sometimes changes have to be made for everyone's happiness." Emma looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Are you saying you and Mom are going to get married?" "Maybe someday, sweetheart. But that would mean some difficult adjustments for everyone." His hand squeezed gently. "I want us to be a family, you know, a real family." "Would you like that?" "I think so," Emma said, then added with calculated innocence, "Would we keep living here? In Dad's house?" Derek's smile was answer enough. That night, after the last guest had left, and the pool lights reflected off empty beer bottles and discarded paper plates, Emma and I sat in my study, reviewing the evening's intelligence. Emma's account of Derek's conversation was the final piece I needed, proof that Derek wasn't just planning to steal my wife and money, but to replace me entirely. "He's not just a con man," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "He's a predator who thinks he can take my life, my home, and my daughter." Emma met my eyes with steady resolve. "So, what do we do now?" I opened my laptop and began typing a message to Owen Ward. The subject line read, "Operation Clean House Phase 2 authorized." "Now, sweetheart," I said as I hit send, "we teach Derek McMahon what happens when someone tries to destroy the wrong family." The grandfather clock chimed midnight, marking the end of Derek's last peaceful night on Earth. The Costa Rica vacation planning provided perfect cover for my real preparations. While Cheryl and Derek pored over travel brochures and discussed restaurants in Manuel Antonio, I was coordinating with Owen to transform our Texas property into a carefully orchestrated trap. The pool area is ideal, Owen reported during our secure video call. He was speaking from a hotel room in Austin where he was supposedly attending a veterans conference. Clear sightlines from multiple positions, controlled access points, and the acoustics will work in our favor. I studied the tactical photographs Owen had taken of our backyard. What about civilians? The neighbors? The Hendersons are in Europe for another month, and the Kowalskis never use their back patio after dark. We'll have complete operational security. Owen's face was serious on the screen. Are you certain about the timeline? Once we initiate, there's no pulling back. I'm certain, I replied, my voice carrying the authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat. Derek has accelerated his own schedule. Jeremiah says Cheryl is meeting with him tomorrow to finalize divorce papers. She's planning to serve me the day we return from Costa Rica. The next evening, I played my role perfectly. I arrived home with flowers, white roses, Cheryl's favorites, and a bottle of champagne to celebrate our upcoming trip. Derek was there, as he increasingly was, helping Cheryl pack and offering suggestions about beachside dining. This is going to be perfect, Cheryl said, her eyes bright with what I now recognized as greed rather than love. Just what our marriage needs. Derek raised his wine glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said, his smile carrying the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. I clinked my glass against Derek's, maintaining eye contact. To getting exactly what we deserve, I replied. Emma, sitting nearby with her homework, looked up and caught her father's eye. The silent communication between us was brief, but complete. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Over the following days, I made a show of tying up business loose ends before our departure. I met with clients, cleared my schedule, and made arrangements for my company to operate in my absence. But my real activities were far more focused. Calvin Bond provided the technical infrastructure, installing nearly invisible surveillance equipment throughout the house and grounds. The cameras were military-grade, designed for hostile environments, and completely undetectable to civilians. More importantly, they would provide undeniable documentation of everything that was about to unfold. The audio pickup is crystal clear, Calvin demonstrated from his laptop. Every conversation, every whisper, every breath will be recorded. When this is over, you'll have enough evidence to justify anything that happens. I also made one final recruitment, Tim Owen, a local businessman who ran a small aircraft charter service. Tim was an old friend from my early days in Texas, and more importantly, he was someone who understood the value of discretion and asking no questions. I need a flight plan filed for Costa Rica, scheduled for next Thursday, I told Tim over lunch at our usual downtown restaurant. But I also need the flexibility to change destinations without notice. No problem, Tim replied, his weathered face asking no questions. Private strips in Mexico, Caribbean, wherever you need to go. Cash basis, no records. That evening, I made my final preparations in the study. I cleaned and loaded my service pistol, a SIG P226 that had been my companion through 3 combat deployments. I updated my will, leaving everything to Emma with specific instructions for my business partners. Most importantly, I recorded a video message explaining my actions, to be released only if the operation went catastrophically wrong. If you're watching this, I said to the camera, then Derek McMahon and Cheryl Kingbright succeeded in destroying my life. The evidence you'll find in this room will explain why I had no choice but to respond with extreme prejudice. Friday night, 3 days before their scheduled departure, Derek made his final mistake. He arrived at the house earlier than usual, around 6 p.m., carrying an expensive bottle of wine and wearing the confident smile of a man about to close a business deal. Marcus, I hope you don't mind, Derek said as we gathered in the living room. But I've been thinking about our Costa Rica trip, and I have a proposition. I settled into my leather chair, accepting the wine with apparent pleasure. I'm listening. While Cheryl and I have been discussing the future, your future, specifically, we think you work too hard, carry too much stress. Derek's voice carried practiced sympathy. What if this vacation becomes something more? What if you find a way to step back from the day-to-day pressures and enjoy life? Emma looked up from her phone with perfectly feigned curiosity. What do you mean? Derek exchanged a meaningful look with Cheryl before continuing. I know some people in Costa Rica, investors, business owners. They're always looking for partners with Marcus's expertise. With the right connections, you could establish a security consulting firm down there. Work when you want, live in paradise. That sounds amazing, I said, my voice warm with false interest. But what about my business here? My clients, my obligations? That's the beauty of it, Cheryl interjected, her voice carrying an excitement that made my blood run cold. You could liquidate your current holdings. Use the capital to start fresh. Clean slate, new life, no stress. I pretended to consider this, sipping my wine thoughtfully. In reality, I was memorizing every word, every gesture, every tell that revealed their true intentions. They weren't just planning to steal my money. They were planning to isolate me in a foreign country, away from my resources and contacts, where I would be completely vulnerable. They were planning to kill me. It's an intriguing idea, I finally said. Let me think about it over the weekend. We can discuss details once we're down there. See how the place feels. Derek's smile was triumphant. That's all we ask. Just keep an open mind. That night, after Derek left and Cheryl retired to her bath with another glass of wine, Emma and I sat by the pool. The underwater lights cast eerie shadows on the bottom, and I found myself studying the deep end, where the pool reached 12 feet. They're planning to kill you, Emma said quietly, her voice carrying absolute certainty. I nodded slowly. In Costa Rica, somewhere remote. Probably make it look like an accident. Derek gets the grieving widow, plus whatever life insurance he can access. But they don't know that you know, Emma said. No, they don't. I looked at my daughter, this remarkable young woman who had chosen to stand with me against the world. Are you ready for this, sweetheart? Once it begins, there's no going back for any of us. Emma met my eyes with steady resolve. I've been ready since the day I saw them together in your bedroom. They destroyed our family, Dad. Now they pay the price. The pool filter hummed quietly in the darkness, circulating water that would soon hold far more than chlorine and designer pool chemicals. In 48 hours, Derek McMahon would discover the difference between planning a con and surviving a war. Sunday morning arrived, gray and humid, with storm clouds gathering over Dallas like an omen. I woke early, my internal clock still set to military time, and found Derek's BMW already in the driveway. The man was becoming bold in his final days, apparently confident enough to spend entire weekends in my home. In the kitchen, I discovered Derek making breakfast, eggs Benedict with hollandaise sauce, fresh fruit artfully arranged, coffee in the expensive French press that had been a wedding gift. The domesticity of it was almost insulting. Morning, Marcus, Derek said with easy familiarity. Hope you don't mind. I thought I'd surprise everyone with breakfast. Cheryl mentioned you love eggs Benedict. Thoughtful of you, I replied, accepting a cup of coffee while studying Derek's movements. The man was comfortable in the space, knowing where everything was kept, moving with the confidence of someone who already considered this his home. Cheryl appeared in silk pajamas and a robe, her hair perfectly tousled in a way that had once driven me wild. Now, I recognized it as another performance, calculated to maintain the illusion of domestic bliss. Isn't this nice, she said, kissing Derek's cheek while barely acknowledging me. Like a real family. Emma entered wearing workout clothes, her expression carefully neutral. Smells good, she said, though I caught the slight tightness around her eyes that indicated she was fighting revulsion. During breakfast, Derek launched into what I recognized as his closing pitch. The Costa Rica plan was expanded. Now, I could sell my business to Calvin Bond, who was supposedly interested in expanding into private security, liquidate assets, and move south permanently. Derek had contacts who could fast-track residency papers, investment opportunities, even a house already picked out. "The place I found is incredible," Derek said, showing photos on his phone. "Ocean view, private beach, completely isolated. You could live like a king down there, Marcus. No stress, no corporate politics, just sun and surf." I studied the photos with apparent interest, noting the property's isolation and the lack of nearby neighbors or roads. It was perfect for murder. In the criminal world, Derek might have succeeded, but he had never faced someone who had spent years planning military operations where failure meant death. "It looks amazing," I said. "When will we need to make a decision?" "Well, that's the thing," Cheryl interjected, her voice carrying practiced urgency. "The property won't stay on the market long. If we're serious, we need to move fast. Maybe extend our vacation. Stay down there long enough to handle the paperwork." "Extend how long?" Emma asked, her concern sounding genuine. Derek smiled at her with a paternal warmth that made my trigger finger itch. "Maybe a month or two, sweetheart. Just until everything's finalized." I made a show of considering this, then nodded slowly. "You know what? Let's do it. Life's too short not to take chances." The relief and triumph on Cheryl and Derek's faces was almost comical. They exchanged a look that spoke volumes. The fish was hooked, ready to be reeled in and cleaned. That afternoon, while Derek and Cheryl went shopping for their extended vacation wardrobe, I initiated the final phase of my preparations. Owen Ward arrived at the house carrying a golf bag that contained far more than golf clubs. "Perimeter is secured," Owen reported as we walked the property. "I've got 3 positions with clear lines of sight to the pool area. Backup routes established. Emergency extraction protocols in place." We stopped at the pool house where Owen had established his primary overwatch position. From here, he had an unobstructed view of the entire backyard while remaining invisible to anyone in the main house. "What about the girl?" Owen asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Emma knows exactly what her role is," I replied. "She's stronger than people give her credit for." Owen nodded, but I caught the concern in my old friend's eyes. This wasn't Afghanistan, where the rules of engagement were clear and the enemy wore different uniforms. This was personal, messy, and involved a 16-year-old girl who was about to watch her stepmother's boyfriend die violently. "Marcus," Owen said carefully. "I've been thinking about alternatives. We could just disappear him, make it look like he ran off with someone else's money. No need for, no." My voice carried absolute finality. "Derek McMahon chose to threaten my daughter, steal from my family, and plan my murder. He gets what that deserves." Sunday evening brought the final dinner before their departure. Derek arrived with champagne and flowers, playing the role of devoted family friend. But I noticed new details, the way Derek studied the security system panel, how he measured distances between rooms, the careful attention he paid to Emma's routines. The man wasn't just planning to rob and kill me in Costa Rica. He was already casing the house for additional opportunities, treating Emma like another asset to be acquired. The realization filled me with a cold rage that reminded me of my worst days in combat, when the enemy had threatened civilians under my protection. After dinner, Derek made his most revealing mistake yet. As we sat by the pool with drinks, he began questioning Emma about her plans for the future, college, career, relationships. His questions were too personal, too focused, carrying an undertone that made Emma visibly uncomfortable. "You're really growing up, Emma," Derek said, his voice carrying what he probably thought was paternal warmth. "Soon you'll be off to college, starting your own life. It's exciting, but also a little scary, isn't it?" "I guess," Emma replied, moving slightly closer to me on the patio couch. "The thing is, sweetheart, family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing to care for each other." Derek's hand rested on the arm of his chair, fingers drumming in a pattern I recognized as nervous energy. When your father and Cheryl and I become a real family, I want you to know that I'll always be here for you. Whatever you need, whatever happens. The promise carried implications that made my vision red around the edges. Derek wasn't just planning to replace me. He was planning to groom Emma, to gradually normalize his presence in her life until she became another victim of his manipulation. That's very kind of you, Emma said with perfect innocence, though I saw her hands trembling slightly. I'm lucky to have people who care about me. That night, after Derek finally left, I found Emma in her bedroom, sitting on her bed with her knees drawn up to her chest. She looked younger than her 16 years, vulnerable in a way that reminded me why I had adopted her in the first place, to protect her from a world that too often hurt innocent people. He's going to try to hurt me, too, isn't he? Emma asked quietly. I sat beside her on the bed, my large hand gentle on her shoulder. Not while I'm alive to prevent it. And after Costa Rica, when you're supposed to be dead? I met her eyes with absolute certainty. Derek McMahon will never have the chance to hurt anyone again. I promise you that, sweetheart. On my honor as your father, and as a soldier. Emma leaned against me, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I'm scared, not of what we're going to do, but of what happens after. When it's all over and it's just us. I held her close, feeling the weight of responsibility that had defined my entire adult life. After it's over, we'll be free. Free to build whatever life we want, wherever we want to build it. But first, we have to finish this. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning illuminated the pool where Derek McMahon would soon discover that some men were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Tuesday evening, our last night before the Costa Rica departure, felt charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the storm clouds gathering overhead. Derek arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, carrying his luggage and wearing the satisfied expression of a man about to close the biggest deal of his career. I can't believe we're really doing this, Cheryl said as we gathered in the living room for a final toast. She had spent the afternoon at the spa, her skin glowing and her eyes bright with anticipation. It feels like the start of something incredible. Derek raised a champagne glass, his smile encompassing the room like a conquering general surveying his territory. To new adventures and the courage to seize them, he said, and to the family that's brave enough to change everything. I clinked my glass against Derek's, studying the younger man's face. He was handsome, charming, and utterly convinced of his own invincibility. In 12 hours, he would be dead. To getting what we deserve, I replied, echoing my toast from days earlier. Emma, dressed in her favorite sundress for the trip, raised her sparkling cider with apparent enthusiasm, but I caught the slight tremor in her hand, the careful control in her voice when she spoke. My daughter was playing her role perfectly, but the strain was showing. After dinner, Derek suggested a final swim. The pool in Costa Rica won't be as nice as this one, he said, already stripping off his shirt to reveal the gym-sculpted physique that had undoubtedly helped him seduce countless victims. We should enjoy it while we can. Cheryl joined him in the water, their laughter echoing off the pool house walls as they splashed and played like teenagers. I watched from my lounge chair, memorizing the scene. By tomorrow night, the pool would need to be drained and professionally cleaned. Emma sat beside me, her feet dangling in the shallow end. To any observer, we looked like a normal family enjoying their last evening at home. But I was conducting a final tactical assessment, noting sightlines, escape routes, and the precise depth markers that would matter in a few hours. The water's perfect, Marcus, Derek called from the deep end. Come on in. Maybe later, I replied. I'm enjoying watching you two have fun. Derek swam closer to where Emma sat, his movements graceful and predatory. What about you, Emma? Want to join us for a midnight swim tomorrow after the flight? I bet Costa Rican pools are warm enough for night swimming. That sounds nice, Emma said, though I saw her inch slightly away from Derek's reaching hand. I've never swam in the ocean at night. We'll have to change that, Derek said, his voice carrying promises that made my blood pressure spike. "There's a lot of new experiences waiting for you down there, sweetheart." At 10 p.m., Derek and Cheryl finally emerged from the pool, their bodies gleaming with water and moonlight. They toweled off while making final plans for the morning departure. Flight at 8 a.m. arrival in San Jose by afternoon. Ground transportation to Manuel Antonio arranged by Derek's mysterious contacts. "I should head home and get some sleep," Derek said, though he made no move to leave. "Long day tomorrow." "You could stay here," Cheryl suggested with the kind of casual intimacy that confirmed everything I already knew. "The guest room is made up, and it would save you the drive in the morning." Derek glanced at me, his expression carefully respectful. "If you don't mind, that would be convenient." "Of course not," I replied with perfect composure. "Consider yourself part of the family." The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek would indeed become part of the family, in the most permanent way possible. By midnight, the house was quiet. Cheryl and Derek had retired to the guest room with whispered promises and barely contained laughter. Emma was supposedly asleep in her bedroom, though I knew she was actually conducting final equipment checks and reviewing her role for tomorrow's performance. I stood in my study, staring out at the pool where underwater lights cast dancing patterns on the surface. In 7 hours, Owen Ward would be in position. In 8 hours, Derek McMahon would wake up for the last time. In 10 hours, the most elaborate revenge operation of my life would reach its climax. I opened my laptop and typed a final message to Calvin Bond. Phase 3 authorized. Initiate 0800 hours. Calvin's response came immediately. Roger. All systems green. Financial assets secured. While Derek and Cheryl slept in ignorant bliss, Calvin was systematically emptying every account Derek had hidden under his various aliases. By morning, Derek McMahon would be financially dead, even before he became physically dead. I checked my watch. 12:47 a.m. In less than 18 hours, I would be a widower and Derek McMahon would be fish food. The thought should have disturbed me, but I felt only the cold satisfaction of a mission approaching completion. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact labeled Cleanup Services, a euphemism for Bernard Starr, a former Army medic who now provided specialized services to people who needed problems to disappear completely. Bernard's teams could make a crime scene look like anything from an accident to a random burglary, depending on the client's needs. I typed a simple message, tomorrow evening, location as discussed. Full service required. Bernard's reply was equally concise. Confirmed. Standard rate applies. At 3 a.m., I made my final preparation. I went to my bedroom closet and retrieved a small wooden box that had belonged to my grandfather, a World War II veteran who had understood the sometimes brutal requirements of protecting family. Inside the box were his dog tags, a few faded photographs, and a letter written to my father shortly before the old man's death. Sometimes, the letter read, a man must choose between being civilized and being effective. When someone threatens your family, choose effectiveness. The world has enough civilized, dead heroes. I refolded the letter and placed it back in the box. My grandfather would have approved of what was about to happen. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Owen Ward, in position. Targets acquired. Awaiting your signal. I replied, proceed as planned. No mercy. At 7 a.m., Derek and Cheryl emerged from the guest room, their faces glowing with post-coital satisfaction and anticipation of the day ahead. They joined Emma and me for breakfast, chattering excitedly about their travel plans and the new life waiting for them in Costa Rica. This is it, Derek said, raising his coffee mug in a final toast. The beginning of everything. I smiled and raised my own mug. The end of everything, I replied quietly, my words lost in the clatter of plates and excited conversation. At 7:03 a.m., we loaded our luggage into my Range Rover for the drive to the airport. Derek sat in the front passenger seat, completely relaxed and unsuspecting. Cheryl and Emma sat in the back, Cheryl chattering about shopping in Costa Rica, while Emma provided appropriately enthusiastic responses. As we pulled out of the driveway, I caught Owen's eye through the rearview mirror. My old friend was hidden in the landscaping across the street, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. Owen nodded slightly. Everything was ready. I turned onto the main road, driving toward what Derek and Cheryl believed was Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. In reality, we were driving toward Tim Owen's private airstrip, where a very different kind of flight plan was waiting. In the passenger seat, Derek hummed quietly to himself, utterly confident in his victory. In 20 minutes, he would discover that Marcus Bright was a far more dangerous enemy than he had ever imagined. The private airstrip sat 30 miles outside Dallas, surrounded by scrub brush and heat shimmer that made the single runway look like a mirage. As I pulled through the gates, Derek frowned at the modest facilities. "This isn't DFW," he said, his voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty I had heard from him. "Private charter," I explained smoothly. "More convenient, no security hassles. I use Tim's service for all my business travel." Derek relaxed, apparently satisfied with the explanation. Beside him, Cheryl was too busy taking selfies to pay attention to their surroundings. In the back seat, Emma sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap like a soldier awaiting orders. Tim Owen emerged from the small terminal building, his weathered face split by a genuine smile. "Marcus, ready for your Costa Rica adventure?" "More than ready," I replied, shaking my old friend's hand. "Any changes to the flight plan?" "Actually, yes," Tim said, his tone casual, but his eyes serious. "Got a call from air traffic control. We need to make a quick stop back at your place. Some paperwork issue with the international flight plan. Shouldn't take more than an hour." Derek's frown deepened. "What kind of paperwork issue?" Tim launched into a detailed explanation about customs documentation and international security protocols, his words carrying the authority of someone who had been flying for 30 years. It was complete fiction, but Derek had no expertise to contradict him. "So, we go back to the house, sort it out, then return here?" Cheryl asked, clearly irritated by the delay. "That's right," I said. "Sorry for the inconvenience, but better safe than sorry with international travel." 20 minutes later, we were pulling back into the Bright family driveway. The house looked exactly as we had left it, peaceful, suburban, normal. Derek couldn't have known that Owen Ward was already in position, that Calvin Bond was monitoring every electronic device on the property, or that Bernard Starr's cleanup crew was standing by 5 miles away. "This is frustrating," Derek muttered as we entered through the front door. "We're going to miss our connection in San Jose." "Relax," I said, my voice carrying the calm authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat. "Why don't we take a quick swim while Tim sorts out the paperwork? The pool's heated, the sun's out. Might as well enjoy the delay." Derek's mood brightened at the suggestion. "You know what? That's not a bad idea." When life gives you lemons, 20 minutes later, we were assembled by the pool. Derek wore his expensive swim trunks and the confident smile of a man who believed his luck was holding. Cheryl had changed into a bikini that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Emma sat on the edge, her feet in the water, playing her role perfectly. I emerged from the pool house carrying drinks, cold beer for Derek, wine for Cheryl, iced tea for myself and Emma. I had been very careful about who got which drink. To making the best of unexpected delays, I toasted, raising my glass. We drank, chatted about our travel plans, and enjoyed the afternoon sun. Derek was relaxed now, back in his element, regaling them with stories about previous Costa Rica trips and the contacts who would make their new life possible. "After all," Derek said, floating on his back in the deep end, "this is nice. Maybe we should just stay here and forget about traveling." "Funny you should mention that," I said, my voice carrying a new edge that made Emma sit up straighter. "I've been thinking the same thing." Derek treaded water, his expression shifting to mild confusion as the drugs in his beer began to take effect. "What do you mean?" I said, standing up from my lounge chair, "that I know exactly who you are, Derek McMahon. I know about your real name, your criminal record, your bank accounts in 3 different states. I know about the other families you've destroyed, the other husbands you've cuckolded and robbed." Derek's face went pale, but the sedative was slowing his reactions. He looked towards Cheryl for support, but she was staring at me with dawning horror. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" Cheryl said, her voice shrill with growing panic. "I'm talking about betrayal," I replied, my voice deadly calm. "I'm talking about my wife planning to divorce me after cleaning out my accounts. I'm talking about her boyfriend planning to murder me in Costa Rica and then groom my 16-year-old daughter." Emma stood up, her face showing none of the surprise or confusion that Derek and Cheryl might have expected. Instead, she looked at her stepmother with cold contempt. "You thought you were so clever," Emma said, her young voice carrying an authority that belied her years. "But you forgot one thing. I love my father more than I could ever fear you." Derek tried to swim toward the pool's edge, but the sedative had sapped his coordination. He floundered in the deep water, panic beginning to override the chemical fog in his brain. "Marcus," Derek gasped. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I interrupted. "My wife's new boyfriend held my daughter underwater in our pool. Said I had 30 seconds to confess. I heard her struggling, gasping." Derek's eyes widened as he realized I was reciting a script. A script that he was about to be forced to perform. "Confess to what?" I screamed, my voice carrying perfectly to the recording devices hidden around the pool area. Derek tried to speak, but the sedative had reached his vocal cords. He could only watch in growing horror as I continued the performance. "Fine, I'll tell you everything," I shouted. That's when Derek felt strong hands grab his ankles, pulling him under the water. Owen Ward had entered the pool from the deep end, using scuba gear to approach unseen. Derek fought with drug-induced desperation, but Owen was a professional killer who had trained for underwater combat. As Derek thrashed beneath the surface, Emma looked at her stepmother with steady eyes and said, "Good job, sweetheart." Then I gave a barely perceptible signal, and a red laser appeared on Derek's forehead as Owen pulled him back to the surface. Derek gasped and choked, his eyes wild with terror as he realized the scope of the trap he had walked into. "Please," he managed to whisper. "I can explain." The explanation never came. Owen's blade found Derek's carotid artery with surgical precision, and Derek McMahon bled out in the same pool where he had planned to terrorize a 16-year-old girl. Cheryl screamed, but the sound died in her throat as she met my eyes. She saw something there that she had never seen before, the cold, implacable gaze of a man who had killed enemies of his country and would kill enemies of his family with equal efficiency. "Your turn, Cheryl," I said quietly. "Time to discuss your future." Cheryl Kingbright had never seen a man die before, and Derek's death had been neither quick nor clean. She stood frozen by the pool's edge, her designer bikini soaked with splashed water and Derek's blood, watching Owen Ward efficiently secure the body with weights that would ensure it never surfaced. "Sit down, Cheryl," I said, my voice carrying the same calm authority I had used with enemy prisoners. "We need to talk." Cheryl collapsed into a patio chair, her entire body shaking. "Marcus, please, I can explain." "You can explain how you plan to divorce me after stealing my assets?" I asked conversationally. "Or how you shared my financial information with a career criminal? Or maybe you'd like to explain why you thought it was acceptable to put Emma in danger?" Emma had moved to stand beside her father, her young face showing no distress at the violence she had just witnessed. If anything, she looked relieved, as if a terrible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I never meant for Emma to be hurt," Cheryl whispered, her voice barely audible. "But you were willing to let Derek groom her," I replied. "You were willing to let him become her stepfather, knowing what kind of man he was." That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. Owen emerged from the pool, his movements efficient and professional. Derek's body had disappeared beneath the surface, weighed down in the deep end where it would remain until Bernard Starr's team arrived for final disposal. Target eliminated, Owen reported quietly. No complications. I nodded, then turned my attention back to my wife. Here's what's going to happen, Cheryl. You have two choices, and I suggest you choose carefully. Cheryl looked up at me with desperate hope. What choices? Choice 1, you disappear tonight, forever. Calvin Bond has already prepared a new identity for you. Sarah Mitchell, unremarkable divorced woman from Phoenix. You get $50,000 and a bus ticket. You never contact me, Emma, or anyone from your old life again. You never remarry, never have children, never do anything that might bring attention to your new identity. And choice 2? Cheryl asked, though her voice suggested she didn't want to know. My smile was colder than winter in Afghanistan. Choice 2 is you join Derek in the deep end of the pool. The silence stretched for long moments, broken only by the pool filter's gentle hum and the distant sound of traffic. Cheryl stared at her husband, this man she'd shared a bed with for 7 years, but had never really known. You're not joking, she whispered. I never joke about protecting my family, I replied. Derek thought he could walk into my house, steal my life, and threaten my daughter. He discovered that some mistakes are permanent. The question is whether you want to learn the same lesson. Emma spoke for the first time since Derek's death, her voice carrying a maturity that reminded me why I was so proud of her. Cheryl, you have 5 minutes to decide. After that, Dad's going to assume you've chosen option 2. Cheryl looked at Emma with something approaching awe. You planned this together. All of it. From the moment I caught you with Derek in Dad's bedroom, Emma confirmed. You stopped being my mother that day. After that, you were just another threat to my family. The brutality of the statement, delivered in Emma's calm, matter-of-fact tone, seemed to break something inside Cheryl. She began to cry. Not the manipulative tears I had seen so often during our marriage, but the desperate sobs of someone who had finally understood the consequences of her actions. I never wanted it to go this far, Cheryl managed between sobs. Derek said it would be easy, that you would never find out, that we could just disappear and start over with my money. After murdering me in Costa Rica? I pointed out. I didn't know about that part. Cheryl insisted. He said he would just file for divorce papers and move on. Owen Ward snorted derisively. Lady, your boyfriend had a detailed plan for disposing of your husband's body in the Costa Rican jungle. We found it on his laptop, along with research about local burial practices and wildlife patterns. The revelation hit Cheryl like a physical blow. He was going to kill Marcus anyway, and eventually you, too, Emma added helpfully. Once he had control of the money and could find a younger replacement. We found communications with 3 other women he was grooming for future cons. Cheryl's sobs intensified, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her choices with clear eyes and selfish intentions. The fact that Derek had planned to betray her too was simply justice. Time's up, I announced, checking my watch. What's your decision, Cheryl? Cheryl looked around the pool area, at Derek's blood still staining the concrete, at Owen Ward's professional indifference, at Emma's cold contempt, at my implacable resolve. She was surrounded by people who had already written her obituary and were simply waiting for her signature. I'll disappear, she whispered. Sarah Mitchell, Phoenix. I understand. I nodded to Calvin Bond, who emerged from the pool house carrying a manila envelope and a small suitcase. New documents are inside, Calvin said, his voice clinically professional. Birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, credit history going back 5 years. Sarah Mitchell is a completely real person as far as any database is concerned. The money? Cheryl asked. Calvin replied, indicating the suitcase. Untraceable bills. Enough to establish yourself somewhere Derek's network can't find you. Which is good, because some of his former associates aren't going to be happy about his disappearance. The threat was clear. Cheryl wasn't just running from me, but from Derek's criminal contacts who would assume she had been involved in his death. You have 1 hour to pack essentials, I told her. Nothing valuable, nothing that can be traced. Calvin will drive you to the bus station, and then Sarah Mitchell begins her new life. Cheryl stood on shaking legs, looking around the home she had shared with me for 7 years. What about our marriage? The divorce? Cheryl Kingbright will simply vanish, I explained. No divorce necessary when there's no one to divorce. Eventually, I'll have you declared legally dead and move on with my life. As Cheryl stumbled toward the house to pack, Emma caught her arm. For a moment, Cheryl's face showed hope. Perhaps her stepdaughter would show mercy, would provide some comfort in this nightmare. Instead, Emma's voice was ice cold. If you ever try to contact us, if you ever use your real name, if you ever do anything that brings trouble back to my father, I will personally hunt you down and finish what we started here tonight. Do you understand me? Cheryl nodded mutely, finally understanding that the sweet 16-year-old girl she had dismissed as naive was actually her husband's daughter in every way that mattered. 45 minutes later, Calvin Bond's car disappeared down the driveway, carrying Sarah Mitchell toward her new life of permanent exile. Emma and I stood by the pool, watching the taillights fade into the distance. Do you think she'll try to come back? Emma asked. I shook my head. Cheryl was always a coward. She'll convince herself that Sarah Mitchell is better than death, and eventually, she'll start to believe it. Owen Ward began the final cleanup phase, draining the pool, while Bernard Starr's team prepared to remove all traces of Derek McMahon's existence. By morning, there would be no evidence that Derek had ever been in the house, much less died there. What now? Emma asked as we walked back toward the house. I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders, feeling the fierce pride that came from knowing she had stood with me against the world. Now we go back to being a family, a real family, without lies or betrayal. Just us? Emma asked. Just us, I confirmed. And anyone who tries to threaten that family learns the same lesson Derek learned tonight. As we entered the house, Emma paused at the threshold. Dad, I'm proud of you for protecting us, for not letting them win. I kissed the top of her head, my voice rough with emotion. I'm proud of you, too, sweetheart. You're the strongest person I know. Behind us, the pool sat empty and gleaming under the floodlights. All traces of violence scrubbed away by professionals who understood the price of crossing Marcus Bright. By dawn, it would be filled with fresh water and ready for normal family use. But Emma and I would never swim in it again. Some victories came with a cost, and the pool would forever remind us of the night we chose family over forgiveness, and survival over civilization. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new home in Montana, watching Emma practice violin through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a pristine mountain lake. We had left Texas quietly, selling the Dallas house to a family who had no idea of its violent history. The pool had been filled with fresh concrete at my insistence. Some graves were better left permanently sealed. The Montana property was everything the Texas house had not been: isolated, defensible, and bought with cash under a corporate shell that Calvin Bond had established. Marcus Bright, the security consultant, had officially retired. My business was sold to a competitor for a sum that allowed me to disappear into comfortable anonymity. Morning, Dad, Emma called as she came inside, her cheeks flushed from the mountain air. At 17 now, she had grown into a young woman who carried herself with quiet confidence and spoke with the precision of someone who understood the weight of words. Morning, sweetheart, I replied, pouring her coffee into the mug that read, World's Best Daughter, a Father's Day gift that I treasured above my military commendations. Sleep well, like the dead, Emma said, then paused at her choice of words. Sorry, old habits. I smiled. We had learned to be careful with our language in those first months after Dallas, when every casual phrase seemed loaded with double meaning. Time had eased the psychological aftershocks, but some changes were permanent. The morning brought our usual routine: breakfast together, review of the day's security protocols, and discussion of Emma's college preparations. She had been accepted to Montana State University with a full scholarship, her essay on overcoming family adversity having impressed the admissions committee without revealing any specifics they couldn't handle. Owen called last night, I mentioned as we ate. He's thinking about retiring to somewhere warm. Good for him, Emma replied. He's earned it. Owen Ward had remained in Texas long enough to ensure that Derek McMahon's disappearance was never investigated. The official story was that Derek had fled to avoid mounting debts, leaving behind creditors and at least 2 other women who claimed he had stolen their money. The authorities seemed satisfied that Derek was simply another con man who had moved on to greener pastures. Any word from Calvin? Emma asked. Sarah Mitchell is working as a restaurant hostess in Tucson, I reported. Living quietly, no contact with anyone from her past life. She's kept her word. We never spoke Cheryl's real name anymore, having collectively decided that Cheryl Kingbright had died that night in Dallas. Sarah Mitchell was someone else entirely, a stranger who shared our former wife and mother's face, but had no claim on our loyalty or concern. The doorbell chimed, an unusual sound in our isolated location. I checked the security monitors and saw the FedEx truck parked in our circular driveway. The driver was genuine. I recognized him from previous deliveries, but the sender was unexpected. The package was addressed to Emma, with a return address in Switzerland. Inside was a single manila envelope containing a letter and a bank routing slip. It's from Jeremiah Jacobs, Emma said, reading the letterhead. Cheryl's old divorce attorney. I read over her shoulder as Emma unfolded the letter. Dear Miss Adams Bright, I am writing to inform you that my client, Cheryl Kingbright, has been declared legally dead after her disappearance 6 months ago. As she died intestate, her personal assets have been distributed according to state law. As her surviving stepchild, you are entitled to her personal effects and remaining financial accounts. The total sum of $127,000 has been deposited into the accounts specified below. Additionally, several items of jewelry and personal effects are being held at my office for your collection at your convenience. Please contact my office to arrange retrieval of these items. Sincerely, Jeremiah Jacobs, Attorney at Law. Emma looked at the bank routing slip, then at her father. Cheryl had her own money? Apparently more than we knew, I replied, though I wasn't surprised. Cheryl had always been good at hiding things when it served her purposes. What should I do with it? I considered the question carefully. The money was legitimately Emma's under the law, and keeping it would raise no suspicions. More importantly, it represented a final severing of ties with her old life. It's yours, I said finally. College fund, maybe, or save it for whatever comes next. Emma folded the letter and set it aside. What do you think she would have done with it? If things had gone differently? Probably spent it on Derek, I replied honestly. Or whoever came after Derek. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the morning sun reflect off the lake. The water was clear and cold, nothing like the chlorinated pool where our old life had ended. Fish jumped occasionally, sending ripples across the perfect surface. Do you ever regret it? Emma asked quietly. What we did. I considered the question seriously. In 6 months, Derek's disappearance had saved at least 3 other women from his cons, based on the communications Calvin had intercepted from Derek's network. Cheryl was living a quiet, harmless life instead of enabling another predator. Emma was safe, happy, and preparing for a future unburdened by the trauma Derek had planned to inflict. No, I said finally. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret protecting our family, even if it made us criminals. Emma finished. I met her eyes steadily. Emma, there are laws written by politicians, and there are laws written by nature. Politicians say we should have called the police and hoped for justice. Nature says we protect what matters most, regardless of the cost. Emma nodded, understanding flooding her young features. She had learned harsh lessons about the world's realities, but she had also learned that some people would always stand between her and harm. "I love you, Dad," she said simply. "I love you, too, sweetheart, more than anything." That afternoon, I received a call on my secure phone. The number was blocked, but I recognized Calvin Bond's voice immediately. "You might want to turn on the news," Calvin said without preamble. Channel 7, Dallas. I found a remote and tuned to the specified channel. The afternoon news was running a story about a massive federal investigation into financial crimes involving luxury interior design firms. The reporter mentioned several arrests, including Derek McMahon's business partner, Adrian McMullen. "Turns out Derek's network was bigger than we thought," Calvin explained. "The FBI has been tracking them for 2 years. Derek's disappearance actually helped break the case. Without him, the others got sloppy." I watched as the news showed perp walks and crime scene footage. Derek's mysterious disappearance was mentioned only briefly, as authorities focused on the criminals they could actually prosecute. "Any chance this comes back to us?" I asked. "Zero," Calvin replied confidently. Derek McMahon is officially a fugitive who fled before the net closed. His death is cleaner this way. No one's looking for a body when they think he's hiding in South America. After the call ended, I turned off the television and found Emma in her room, studying for her final high school exams. She looked up as I entered. "Good news?" she asked, reading my expression. "The best kind," I replied. "The kind that closes books permanently." That evening, we cooked dinner together, pasta with my grandmother's marinara recipe, garlic bread, and a salad from our own garden. It was a simple meal, but it represented everything we had fought to preserve: family, tradition, and the peace to enjoy both without threat. As we cleaned up, Emma paused at the kitchen window. "Dad, do you think we'll ever have to do anything like that again?" I joined her at the window, looking out at the lake where loons called across the darkening water. "I hope not, sweetheart. But if we do, I know," Emma said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "We'll face it together." I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders, feeling the fierce pride that came from knowing she understood what family really meant. We had paid a terrible price for that understanding, but some lessons could only be learned in blood and darkness. Outside, the Montana wilderness stretched endlessly in all directions, a testament to the idea that some places remain beyond the reach of civilization's complications. Here, the only laws that mattered were the ones written in nature's brutal clarity: protect what you love, destroy what threatens it, and never apologize for doing what survival demands. As father and daughter stood together in the gathering darkness, we knew with absolute certainty that Marcus Bright and Emma Adams Bright would face whatever came next, as we had faced everything else, together, uncompromising, and utterly without mercy for anyone foolish enough to threaten our family again. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 8 times, marking another peaceful evening in our new life. But beneath the domestic tranquility lay the steel-hard truth that had carried us through our darkest hour: some people were worth killing for, and some people were worth dying for, and the wisdom to know the difference was the most valuable inheritance a father could give his daughter. In the distance, a wolf howled across the lake, a sound both beautiful and terrifying, carrying the ancient promise that predators still roam the world, and that the strongest among them would always protect their pack, no matter the cost.